mother and daughter narrowly escape death after becoming the targets of an unknown gunman.
They didn't attempt to take the car. They didn't ask for any money.
I had 8 shell casings on the street. I was hoping they weren't hit that many times.
I thought, why would somebody want to shoot my daughter?
Their would-be killer is caught on tape.
Video depicted the suspect arrive and flee the scene after the shooting.
This was not a robbery. This was a straight-up execution.
But just as the health of one of the survivors improves, she vanishes.
I was thinking that whoever didn't finish the job, he found her.
The evidence leads detectives to a killer driven by jealousy and obsession.
They were in a dating relationship, but it was not public knowledge.
You didn't give her a ride home. She didn't want me to.
She loved her so much that she didn't want to see her be with anyone else. She's the worst of the worst.
We knew what the motive was. If I can't have you, no one can.
Tuesday, November 24th, 2015. It's a brisk fall evening in Linden, New Jersey, when emergency dispatchers receive a panicked call from a young woman.
Hello, 911. Please come to Valley Street, the corner of Valley Street and Kevin Street now, please. We just got shot in the car.
At approximately 7:16 p.m., Linden Central Dispatch, via police radio, broadcasted that there were shots fired on the 900 block of Middlesex Street.
We got 2 victims here, 2 victims.
The occupants of the vehicle were Tarita Julius and their daughter Chanel, who was 15 at the time.
Tarita Julius was the first victim. She's in the driver's seat of that car. She is gravely injured. She had attempted to drive away from the shooting area and then subsequently had crashed the car. Chanel had been hit. She'd been injured, but not as seriously injured as Tarita clearly was.
There were significant gunshot injuries to the torso area of Tarita Julius. She was in and out of consciousness. They knew that they needed to get medical attention.
As Tarita and Chanel are transported to the hospital, officers scour the scene for evidence to help them piece together what happened.
I had 8 shell casings on the street. I was hoping she wasn't hit that many times.
One specific neighbor was able to provide information about seeing a large male walking down the street and then eventually running back to a silver SUV type car.
The second witness provided me with basically the same description. Large black man, heavy set.
The Linden Police Department canvassed the area for video surveillance recordings, and they were able to identify a video which depicted the suspect arrive and flee the scene after the shooting.
The video I recovered was in poor quality. It was very grainy, but you could see that it did fit the description provided by the witnesses. At this point, we canvassed additional areas. It's a big world out there. There's a lot of guys driving a silver vehicle.
As they conclude their initial sweep of the crime scene, investigators receive news from the hospital.
Tarita was shot 8 times, both in her chest and in her abdominal area.
Her injuries were significant. She was ultimately taken into surgery.
Police contact the victim's loved ones to inform them of the shooting.
My sister called me frantic, yelling, "You have to get to the hospital. Tarita was shot." Why would somebody want to shoot my daughter? So I just dropped everything, grabbed my coat,
Detectives also head to the hospital to speak with those waiting for news on Tyrita and Chanel.
It's wildly important to get information about your victims to determine what might be the motivating factor for this type of violence. A lot of times in these cases, the victims don't survive. And so we're left with kind of filling the gaps and the holes by talking to, the next best thing, the people who are in their lives every day.
Tyrita Julius was born June 6, 1974, in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Tyrita's father was not a constant in her life, so Tyrita's mother raised her with the help of her family.
I really wasn't a single parent. I had my mother, I had my brothers, I had my sister. So Tyrita never really wanted for nothing.
From that strong foundation, Tyrita grew into a confident and charismatic young woman.
She's very family-oriented, loved everyone around her, never really had a bad bone of hate in her body for anything. She just always wanted to see everybody around her succeed and just be together.
After graduating high school, Tyrita turned her love of caring for people into a career.
She was an administrative assistant office administrator for Rutgers University Hospital.
While making plans for her future, she fell for a man named Jamar Colbert.
He was basically opposite of her. He was very laid back, low key. He wasn't like the party dance type, He would kind of just chill back with his shades and his drink.
Tyrita felt like her and Jamar would be together forever. And she never mentioned marriage, but she always talked about Jamar being her one and only.
They dated about maybe a year before she got pregnant. She got pregnant with Dante. Then a couple of years after that, she got pregnant with Chanel.
She loved her kids more than anything in this world. Dante and Chanel were her first worry about every and anything on this planet.
We were a real tight-knit family growing up, My mother's personality was huge, larger than life.
While Tyrita thrived as a parent, Jamar struggled with the expectations of fatherhood, and it took a toll on their relationship.
They were rocky. Ultimately, she just realized that he just wasn't for her. It wasn't a good fit. And they just decided to end the relationship.
Tyrita never shared how tough those times were. She always had a positive outlook and that there was a better outlook on the horizon. She dated after Jamar, and nothing that even compared to him, but I think, her kids were such a focus in her life that dating was just something that came second.
She put the work in. She was the service rep at the hospital.
She says, Mom, I want to get a big house so all of us can live together. She was getting her life together financially. She was just trying to reach that goal.
Now, everything Tyrita has built is at risk as she fights for her life. As Tyrita and her daughter Chanel undergo treatment at the hospital, detectives focus on their witness interviews and the viciousness of the attack to narrow down possible motives.
There's no indication that the person attempted to take anything. They didn't attempt to take the car.
In my mind, this was not a robbery. This was a straight-up execution. We wanted to know if Tyrita and Chanel had any kind of ongoing disputes with anybody in the neighborhood, family members, or anything that could lead us up to the fact of who would do this to them.
Coming up, Tyrita's loved ones provide detectives with some alarming connections.
When I heard she was in a motorcycle club, I immediately thought motorcycle gang and thought the worst, right?
And a potential motive is revealed.
They had displayed elements of jealousy and obsessiveness over Tyrita. There might be that animosity flowing.
41-year-old Tyrita Julius and her daughter, 15-year-old Chanel Colbert, are being treated for injuries they suffered during a brutal neighborhood shooting. Investigators at the hospital check to see if anyone is well enough to talk.
Chanel Colbert, take one, marker.
I was grazed on my mouth and on my wrist.
Do you remember how many times that guy shot you guys?
I believe it was like 8 or 9 shots.
Did you feel like you was lucky to only walk away with just a graze?
I felt extremely lucky. Like, extremely lucky. That evening, me and my mom were supposed to go to my brother's basketball game, which was normal for us. She had just got off of work. I was just getting out of school. She said she was gonna go out to pull the car around. As I was coming out, that's when I noticed a guy, like, walk around the car. As I was getting into the vehicle, I just remember as I was closing the door, looking over, and I seen the gun pointed into the window. I didn't even have a moment to think. I kind of like just went into shock, and I just remember us trying to take cover. I didn't realize that I was injured until I went to call 911. I was just concerned for my mom.
Investigators leave her to rest and learn that Tyrita survived her first surgery, but is still in the ICU on a ventilator and therefore unable to talk to them. Detectives turn to Tyrita's loved ones to find out if she has any enemies who might wish her harm.
Nothing made sense to me. Honestly, when I first heard of the event, I thought it was like, just a random act of violence who would want to hurt my mother and my sister.
But they share an unusual detail about her that catches the attention of detectives.
Tyrita was a member of the Rough Riders motorcycle club.
When I heard she was in a motorcycle club, I immediately thought motorcycle gang and thought the worst, right?
Police wonder if her association with the group led to violence. But when they locate members of the Rough Riders to interview, they find it's not quite what they expected.
Definitely not a bike gang. But with us, with Rough Riders as a lifestyle, we're closer to an SC, social clubs. Not all of our members have bikes, but they're still part of the lifestyle.
They did things in the community for the community. They weren't belligerent or violent.
We do book bag drives, we do feeding the homeless, passing out toiletries and stuff. You're actually doing something for people that are in need of it, and you can give it.
The Rough Riders say Tyrita grew especially close to one member, a woman named Jennifer Sweeney.
Jennifer Sweeney and Tyrita were in a dating relationship. It was known to the Rough Riders, known to certain members, and known to certain friends of Tyrita's, but it was not public knowledge to her family.
She never told me that they were involved. Something you just know, you can just put 2 and 2 together.
They said that they had been in a relationship for upwards of 3 years. And in fact, had started to end right before this shooting occurred.
As of the date of the shooting on November 24th of 2015, they were actually broken up, which was kind of the first sign of, okay, we got to look into this more.
In interviewing a few of the Rough Riders, it became known to us that they were at a fundraising event in New Jersey. And Jennifer was highly upset at this time because Tarita was dancing with a man named Hassan Nicely.
To investigators, it sounds like a potential motive.
Jennifer Sweeney had displayed elements of jealousy and obsessiveness over Tarita. That's when they're kind of clued into the fact that there might be that animosity flowing. The event happened about 3 days before.
This information in itself is very important to us because now we're building a little bit of framework on the events leading up to the shooting. This possibly could be part of it.
New Jersey investigators are looking for the gunman that shot Tarita Julius and her teenage daughter while they sat in a car outside their home. They explore the possibility that Tarita's relationship with Jennifer Sweeney led to the attack, and they dig into Jennifer's life before she joined the Rough Riders.
Jen was a local girl from Tinton Falls and comes from a very good family. Her mother and her grandmother, both in the education business, and they were pretty high up.
She lived with her mother. Her mother was very involved in her life.
Despite that close relationship, Jennifer didn't follow the family legacy and become an educator.
Jennifer was a technician for a utility company. She had a decent job that she was there for many years. She was financially stable.
Her mother and family loved her. She was generally described as even-keeled. She's not a person who speaks too much or says too much. She got educated, an intelligent girl. On the peripheral, she rode motorcycles. She had some friends that rode motorcycles too. And some of them would ride with the Rough Riders.
Jen was brought in by a previous member. She was always quiet. She would keep to herself until she got to know you.
We had to get her out of her shell a little bit, you know. But after that, we got to know her, and she was cool. You could talk to her and make jokes.
Tarita's outgoing personality helped break through Jennifer's shy nature, and their friendship quickly turned romantic.
In the beginning, Tarita, she enjoyed being around Jen. They hung out a lot.
So I thought they were just friends, and then they got close. Like, okay, now y'all besties. But after that, I found out, like, oh, you know, okay, cool. Like, it makes sense now, because they was close. They looked great together, you know. That she brought a smile on Jennifer's face. Jennifer made sure she was smiling.
However, friends say Jennifer's dependence on Tarita bordered on obsession, and Tarita eventually broke things off.
Jen was overprotective. She was always the one sitting next to Tarita, said, you can't do this, you can't do that.
Tarita was just tired of the arguments. Tarita didn't want to be controlled.
And when Tarita moved on to a man, Jennifer did not seem happy about it.
It became known that by August, she was indeed dating Hassan Nicely. So with that, I wanted to now speak with Jennifer Sweeney.
what the detective was trying to do is figure out, where she was on the night of the shooting.
She was very calm, noticeably upset, concerned, and more than willing to help.
She said that she was the only woman that Tyrita had ever been with. Jennifer did admit that there had been about 3 days prior to the shooting that they had not been speaking or that they had been on a break, as she worded it.
She advised me that on the night of the shooting, she was en route to Linden because it was a Tuesday and that was their normal meeting night. She received a phone call from a fellow club member who advised her that Tyrita was shot.
They detoured and she went right to the hospital.
The timeline puts Jennifer nowhere near the scene of the shooting. Plus, surveillance video and eyewitness statements show a male shooter. So investigators rule her out for the time being. 10 days after the attack, there is miraculous news from the hospital. Tyrita is awake and is going to survive the shooting.
I was there, and first thing she said was, "Where my kids? How's Chanel?"
It was extremely relieving for me. That was just the only thing I wanted to hear, that she made it out and would be okay.
Tyrita is also well enough to speak with detectives at the hospital.
My initial contact with Tyrita, she had difficulty breathing, she was struggling to speak. So we just went for the basics. Do you have any problems with anybody?
Tyrita is open about the tensions in her relationship with Jennifer.
At this time, she felt that Jen would not have been behind the shooting.
She was just as in the dark as everybody else about who would have wanted her dead.
As detectives work to formulate new leads, Tyrita continues her recovery and Jennifer remains by her side.
Tyrita felt obligated to have Jen there because she felt like Jen was there for her throughout the whole ordeal. I don't know if they were still romantically there, but she wanted her there, I guess, as a friend.
Jennifer would call and tell us updates on it. Jennifer made it seem like she was back. Her and Tyrita was back together because of all the stuff Jennifer was doing with being at the hospital.
Jennifer was showing people pictures of engagement rings that she was getting for her. So without Tyrita's input, Jennifer decided that they were back together and told other people that they were together.
39 days after the incident, in January, Tyrita was released from the hospital. She was in not best of condition at this time.
It was decided by her family that she was going to go stay at her mom's house.
2 months pass without any progress identifying the shooter. Then, in March 2016, 3.5 months after Tyrita was first shot, the case takes an alarming new turn.
Well, my aunt received a phone call that my mom was missing. She had went out and she did not make it back home.
Coming up, Tyrita's disappearance renews efforts to identify her shooter.
When I came home, she wasn't there.
We know that Tyrita is not answering her phone.
And a new suspect emerges.
You could see his whole demeanor just changed. He was, "Oh, they got me."
On March 9th, 2016, Queen Julius, the mother of shooting victim Tyrita Julius, contacts investigators. She says that over the past few months, Tyrita's recovery had been difficult.
She was very dependent on others. Her arm was stiff, and she really couldn't do nothing. for herself. So you have to cook, feed her, help her bathe.
Jen was just there as her partner, you know. She was playing the role of caring, being there, you know, help her with her daily needs.
But now, Queen is worried something else has happened to her daughter.
March the 8th, I got up and I told Tyree before I went to work, I said, get up and move that arm. When I came home, she wasn't there. So I called Jen and I said, Jen, is Tyree with you? She said, no, I dropped her off at the train station.
She had dropped her off at the Long Branch train station at approximately 7:02, 7:03 p.m. with the means of taking a 7:17 train back to Linden.
Then I asked her, I said, well, why would you drop her off at the train station if you picked her up from home? And she said, well, she told me to drop her off there.
We, as an investigative group, found this kind of odd, being that she was recently shot and her shooter has not yet been apprehended.
I was thinking that whoever they didn't get got her. The person that didn't finish the job, he found her.
It was vitally important to talk to Jennifer Sweeney because she's the last person to have seen her.
You went down and picked her up?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. What time was that about?
Like 11:50 something.
Jennifer explained that they ran a few errands in the evening hours. Jennifer had driven Tyree to the Long Branch train station to drop her off so that she could return home to Linden.
How come you didn't give her a ride home?
She didn't want me to.
Tyree insisted that she be dropped off as she didn't want to inconvenience Jennifer from having to travel back to her home.
What train did she attempt to catch, you think?
I think it's the 7:17. I wasn't paying attention to the time, but that was the next one that came.
She indicated that after dropping Tyree off, she went to her friend Donna Hafner's house in Long Branch. Donna was not home at the time, so Jennifer said she remained there for approximately 1 hour with Donna's husband.
Jennifer was cooperative and she was committed to assisting us in locating Tyree.
While Jennifer is not considered to be a suspect in Tyree's disappearance, investigators want to confirm the details of her statement.
We wanted to go back and search her vehicle and her house just to ensure that everything that she had told us was factually accurate.
They were able to find a receipt from Ichiban which showed that, you know, they had been there. They were able to corroborate that the two of them went to the DMV together because they had video from inside and everything appeared normal.
When detectives follow up with Jennifer's friend, Donna Hafner, she confirms that Jennifer visited her husband that evening, but admits it was very odd.
Jennifer did not particularly get along with Donna's husband, Junior.
Jennifer ended up awkwardly sitting with Donna's husband for a good amount of time before then leaving.
Detectives suspect Jennifer may have been trying to create an alibi for the night of Tyree's disappearance.
Our next efforts were focused on reviewing video surveillance recordings in an effort to locate Tyree or Jennifer traveling to the Long Branch train station.
The footage ultimately makes extremely clear that neither Jen Sweeney nor Tyree Julius was ever there on March 8th, 2016.
Being the last person that saw her alive and then having her give information that is inconsistent with known evidence, that's going to lead them to be suspicious of her.
After uncovering evidence that Jennifer Sweeney lied about the disappearance of Tyrita Julius, investigators revisit the possibility she was also involved in the shooting that took place 4 months prior.
We decided to go to the phones. Communication data warrant was prepared for Jennifer Sweeney's telephone number.
Records show Jennifer added Tyrita to her account, giving her full access to Tyrita's phone.
She was really utilizing that to really stalk where she was and who she was talking to.
One of the numbers belongs to the man Tyrita's friend said Jennifer became jealous over.
The night before the shooting, she is constantly calling Hassan Nicely's phone, like *670ing the number, basically blocking a number so that they can't see who's calling, building herself up, like basically into a fury that whole night.
Though he ignored Jennifer's harassing calls, the same pattern repeated just before Tyrita vanished.
February 1st, there was a bevy of lookups in these phone finders and things like that where she's starting to do intel.
That leads us to believe that she was becoming more and more jealous in the days before both the shooting and then the disappearance.
However, the most damning evidence comes from Jennifer's GPS data.
Jennifer Sweeney's phone was accessing cell phone towers in the Linden area at the same time that Tyrita was shot. This was contrary to what Jennifer had told us when we first met with her.
The data showed that she'd been lying, and she was at the same tower at the same time that Tyrita was.
Not only was Jen in Linden, but she was speaking to an individual with a prepaid cell phone. She spoke to this individual 19 times on the day of the shooting and 25 times the following day.
Investigators track the prepaid cell phone to a user named Andre Harris.
We learned that Jen Sweeney and Andre Harris went to high school together. They were friends for sure. Somewhat more recently, they kind of reconnected a little bit. From first glance, he certainly fits the general description of what we were given for the shooting. Andre Harris is a big guy, and he happened to drive a silver vehicle.
They also were able to look at the location of his cell phone around the time of the shooting. His phone is at the same tower location that Jennifer Sweeney's is and that Tyrita Julius is. So that puts them all in the same area at the same time on the night of the shooting.
We found that he had an outstanding Long Branch warrant for his arrest. At this point, a motor vehicle stop was effectuated by a marked unit, and he was taken into custody.
He was questioned about his relationship, if any, with Tyrita Julius, as well as his relationship with Jennifer Sweeney. And he provides information that he does, in fact, know Jennifer Sweeney. He considers her to be an acquaintance that he's had for a long time.
Andre claims he does not know Tyrita and denies the evidence placing him near the scene of the shooting.
While interviewing Andre, there were search warrants prepared for Andre, his vehicle, and his residence. The field team was out there. We received a phone call advising that they had located human remains in the yard of Andre's residence.
Once myself and Detective Mikolajczyk were informed about the information, and we were then able to confront Andre Harris.
You could see his whole demeanor just changed. He was, "Oh, they got me."
While Andre initially denied having any information, he ultimately confessed it was Tyrita Julius's remains that were buried on his property.
Andre admits to being the gunman in the shooting 9 months earlier, but insists Jennifer is the one who killed Tyrita.
He said on the evening of the homicide, Jen appeared at his door. She had called him shortly before, saying, "Hey, gonna stop by." This was highly unusual because he tells me he tries to keep his distance from Jennifer She asked him for a cord. She gives him apparently the explanation she's having issues with her trunk, so he supplies her with a white electrical cord.
She took the cord and went back to her vehicle, where she remained for several minutes.
He's wondering what Jen's doing out there. He exited his home, and at this time, he noticed that Tarita was in the front seat with an electrical cord wrapped around her neck. Jen is now pointing a gun at him, demanding he dig a grave.
The details Andre provides are vague, but evidence from the gravesite seems to confirm his statement.
Tarita is found inside two trash bags, and the electrical cord was still wrapped around her neck.
He has no known connection or really anything to do with Tarita Julius, which tells us that the motive is still lying with Jennifer Sweeney.
Now we're thinking, why would Jen kill Tarita in such a fashion? Because Jen's intention was to propose to Tarita. She also wanted Tarita to move in with her, but Tarita wasn't quite ready for this yet because she wasn't healthy. Maybe what triggered it this day was she did propose, or she did ask Tarita to move in with her, but something occurred that Jen did a full 180 on. Shortly after this interview, Jennifer was placed into custody.
Andre Harris and Jennifer Sweeney were charged with the murder and desecration of human remains of Tarita Julius.
When they told us that they found Tarita, I just held my brother. I just couldn't even think at that point in time. I just felt numb.
It's hard. Your child's supposed to outlive you. You're not supposed to bury your child.
Prosecutors begin preparing the case for trial. But without direct evidence tying Jennifer to the murder, they know the outcome is less than certain.
Even if you think you have the strongest case imaginable, you never know what's going to happen with the jury.
Following his arrest, Andre Harris, the confessed shooter of Tarita Julius and Chanel Colbert, accepts a plea deal in exchange for his testimony against Jennifer Sweeney.
He pled guilty to the attempted murder of Tarita Julius, and he was sentenced to 16 years of New Jersey State Prison.
Naturally, we ask Andre, how did you ever get involved in this?
He told us that Jennifer Sweeney was threatening basically his life and his kids. She would make mention to him that she knew where his kids were at school or what they were doing.
Jennifer just couldn't take that Tarita wasn't happy. You couldn't take the rejection.
She enlisted Andre Harris to shoot her. And Jen had to kind of play her role as the caring girlfriend. I think maybe even legitimately, Jen tried to make it work, but ultimately, she got suspicious again and killed Tarita in Andre Harris's driveway and made him bury the body.
He said, I went along with it because I had no choice. It was either my people or Tarita, and I don't know Tarita.
After multiple delays, the trial finally gets underway in August 2021. Prosecutors paint a picture for the jury of a woman driven by jealousy to commit murder.
We knew what the motive was. If I can't have you, no one can.
She did plan on proposing. She had showed several of her friends an engagement ring she wanted.
But Tarita was moving on. Jennifer snapped because she loved Tarita so much that she didn't want to see her be with anyone else. She was that jealous, and she couldn't handle her moving on.
But the defense argues that the evidence proves Jennifer had nothing to do with Tyrita's death.
Andre, we know, attempted to murder Tyrita up in Linden, and then the second time, her body is dead in the backyard of his house, having been choked to death. Our theory was that Andre was jealous of Tyrita because he wanted to have a relationship with Jen. So he was wiping out the competition.
On September 3rd, 2021, the jury renders its verdict.
Jen Sweeney was found guilty of every count of the indictment except the attempted murder charge against, as it related to Chanel Colbert, was dismissed.
In May 2022, she is sentenced to 95 years in prison.
Jennifer's sentence I found fair. I want her to be in jail, in prison, suffering for the rest of her life. She should never see the light of day.
She's the worst of the worst. I just couldn't fathom how she could just sit up in my house and look in Tyrita's face and all the time knowing what you did, the shooting, and then plotting this.
My mom was like the glue. She made sure we stayed in contact with each other. She just set things up so that we can be a family.
My grandmother, she lost her daughter. We lost our mother. It's a huge loss, you know what I mean? And all for what? For nothing. For nothing.
My cousin asked me one time, well, how can we get the old you back? And I told him, that part is gone. I don't think that part is ever coming back.
Human beings are peculiar creatures. They commit the most heinous acts for reasons so absurd, so pathetic, that they defy the very logic of a civilized society. I have spent decades staring into the abyss of the human condition, and I can tell you this. The truth is never hidden as well as the guilty think it is. It usually sits there right in plain sight, waiting for someone with enough patience to piece together the shattered glass of a life cut short. You look at a man like Nick Cordova, a father, a husband, a man building a future, and then you look at the cold, clinical reality of his final moments, moments broadcast live to his own children through a digital screen. And you have to ask yourself, what kind of monster looks at a life and sees only an insurance policy? My. The world is full of shadows, but they only exist because someone is trying very hard to block the light. You listen to the story of what happened that Wednesday in May 2020, and you realize immediately that the narrative being fed to the police by Dave Sweetman was as porous as a screen door in a hurricane. Here is a man, a business partner, who claims two masked intruders burst into their office, held him at gunpoint, hit him, and executed his partner, all while he somehow miraculously survives with nothing but a bump on the head and a cut on his hand. He tells the officers he gave them everything he had, yet they find over $1,000 in his pocket when they pat him down. You have to be kidding me. A man who supposedly just lost everything he had to robbers somehow manages to keep a substantial amount of cash securely tucked away in his trousers. That is not a robbery. That is a performance, and it is a poor one at that. When you analyze the scene, you have to look at the geometry of betrayal. Nick Cordova was a man of integrity, a man who saw potential where others saw only risk. But he made the fatal error of trusting a man with a history of fraud, assault, and deception. The tension in that office had been simmering for months. Nick had discovered money missing, $30,000. Then another $15,000, and he had begun to realize that his partner was not just an associate, but a parasite. Nick's fear that he was being watched, his eerie, prophetic joke about Dave hiring a hitman for insurance money. These were not the ramblings of a paranoid man. They were the desperate observations of someone watching the trap close around him. And then there is the matter of that insurance policy. $8 million. Do you have any idea how much $8 million does to a man with no conscience? It transforms him. It turns a business disagreement into a death sentence. The behavior of Dave Sweetman in the aftermath is not just bizarre. It is the hallmark of a man trying to steer the ship away from the rocks he himself had set. He peeked through the blinds before the shooters arrived. He handed over a gun, a weapon he claimed had never been fired, to the authorities through a crack in the door while he stood over his partner's body. He pushed for the insurance claims a mere 5 days after the murder, all while standing in front of the widow, Alicia. The arrogance required to think you can commit such a crime and then continue to play the grieving partner is staggering. It is a level of psychological detachment that only truly dangerous individuals possess. He was not looking for a business future. He was looking for an exit strategy, and he was willing to erase his partner to claim the payout. One cannot help but feel for Alicia Cordova. She is a woman who has spent 6 years fighting a war on 2 fronts. One against the cold silence of the Gilbert Police Department, and the other against a man who continues to operate his business as if he did not leave a crater in her life. She is not just a grieving widow. She is a relentless investigator of her own tragedy. She watched that surveillance footage. She saw the reality of the execution, and she recognized the pattern that the authorities seemed intent on ignoring. She saw her husband, a man who loved his family, hunted down in his own office because he was worth more to his partner as a statistic than as a friend. The failure of justice here is a systemic rot that leaves one shaking their head. 200 pages of redacted documents. A detective who shows promise, who builds a timeline, only to be moved aside. A community that feels its own police department is withholding the very truths they are sworn to protect. It is a slow, grinding misery for those left behind. The killers, whoever they were, the men in the green shirts, are ghosts, but the mastermind remains within reach. Protected by the lethargy of bureaucracy and the legal games of insurance settlements and forged signatures. You have to wonder about the nature of evil. It is not always a chaotic storm. Often, it is calculated. It is a man pacing in an office, waiting for the red truck to arrive. It is a man who knows exactly what he is doing, who balances the ledger of his life against the life of another, and finds the math to be in his favor. It is a cold, calculated transaction. Nick Cordova deserved to come home to his children. He deserved to see his business thrive or fail on its own merits. Not because someone decided his death was the most profitable venture. The truth of this case is etched into that office floor, into the quiet, terrified final moments of a man who realized too late that he was standing next to a snake. And the saddest part of all? The snake is still there, moving in the tall grass, while the justice that should have been served remains trapped in the redacted pages of a file that refuses to speak. My. If there is one thing I have learned in my life, it is that you can run, you can hide, you can scrub the records, but the dead? They always have a way of whispering the truth until someone finally listens. My. You see, the thing about human beings is that we are fragile creatures held together by secrets, pride, and the desperate, gnawing hunger for something that does not belong to us. I have stood in rooms just like this one for 30 years, and I have learned one absolute truth. People will do the most unimaginable, pathetic things for a stack of paper currency. They think they are clever. They think they are invisible. but they always leave a trail. Let's look at this Nick Cordova, a man who built his life with his own two hands. A man who believed that if you worked hard and stayed honest, the world would play fair. He was a father. He was a husband. He was a man who, in his final moments, was trying to share a digital connection with his children, never knowing that he was staring into the barrel of his own demise. It is a tragedy that cuts deep, the kind that makes you want to hang up your badge and walk into the sunset, if only the world allowed such a luxury. Then we have this partner, this David Sweetman. You listen to the way he speaks, the way he stumbles over his own narrative, and you have to be kidding me. A robbery? A couple of strangers in green shirts? Is the oldest, most transparent lie in the book. You find a man with $1,000 in his pocket. A man who claims he was unconscious during the struggle, yet somehow had the presence of mind to chamber a round in his own weapon after the chaos had settled. It does not add up. Math is a cold, unyielding mistress, and when you look at the financials, the missing money, the insurance policies worth millions. The shifting stories, it starts to look less like a robbery and more like a carefully orchestrated exit strategy. I have walked through crime scenes where the air was so thick with deception you could cut it with a knife. You see the disarray, the desk pushed from its place, the random objects strewn about like pieces of a bad play, and you realize the perpetrator is trying to tell a story that is not true. They want you to believe in the monsters that came through the door, so you do not look at the monster already sitting in the room. Why would a man peek through the blinds if he were not waiting for someone? Why would he be so obsessed with money that his own employee could hear the greed dripping from his arguments? People think they can outrun the past. They think if they change the name of the business or move to a different office, the ghost will stop following them. But the truth is, the dead have a way of lingering. You look at the life of the victim, a man defined by his devotion to his family, his steady hand, his refusal to be a victim, and then you contrast it with the life of the one who remains. It is a study in contrasts. The guilt is not always written in blood on the floor. Sometimes it is written in the silence, in the redactions on a police file, in a way a man refuses to look you in the eye. It makes me wonder about the nature of justice. We are supposed to be the guardians of the truth, the ones who bring peace to the families who have had their hearts ripped out. But when the system turns its back, when the files disappear into black ink, when the detectives rotate out like they are on a carousel, you are left with nothing but the cold, hard reality of a job unfinished. It is not just about the gun. It is not just about the trigger. It is about the intent. It is about the cold, calculated decision to trade a human life for a payout, to treat a partner like a commodity to be liquidated. I have seen it before. The arrogance of the perpetrator who thinks they have beaten the game. But every time they open their mouth to explain the unexplainable, they slip. They get louder. They get more defensive. They talk about their own trauma as if they're the victim in the play they wrote themselves. It is truly sickening. And for the wife, for Alicia, waiting for years, watching the wheels of justice turn into rusted cogs. It is a hell that no person should have to endure. You have to look at the shadows. You have to follow the money. You have to listen to what is not being said. Because in every case, somewhere, there is a thread. And if you pull that thread, the entire tapestry of lies begins to unravel. It might take time. It might take a lifetime. But the truth does not have an expiration date. And for a man like me, who has seen too much to ever truly sleep soundly, the only thing that matters is that one day, when the lights go out and the last document is reviewed, the truth is the only thing left standing in the room. Human beings are peculiar creatures. They kill for the most trivial reasons imaginable, and they leave behind a trail of broken hearts and shattered lives like confetti in a windstorm. I've spent a lifetime looking into the abyss, and I tell you, the abyss rarely offers any comfort. It only offers silence. And in the summer of 1969, in a quiet corner of Wisconsin, That silence became absolute for a young girl named Stephanie Casper. My. You have to be kidding me, you think to yourself. How does a beautiful 18-year-old girl simply vanish into the ether? But the reality is far more clinical, far more cold than any nightmare you could conjure up in your sleep. Stephanie was an innocent, a girl who had her whole life mapped out, just another shift at a restaurant, dreaming of independence, dreaming of love. And then, in the blink of an eye, she was gone. When the police finally found her, they did not find a person. They found a puzzle scattered across the riverbank of the Root River, piece by piece, wrapped in the pages of a Milwaukee Sentinel newspaper. It was not a crime of passion, not a wild, uncontrolled outburst. This was the work of a surgeon of death. The dismemberment was deliberate, methodical, precise. It takes a cold heart and a steady hand to do what was done to her. It speaks to someone who had time, someone who had patience, and someone who possessed a terrifying level of control. I look at the evidence, and I see the arrogance of the predator. Burned matches, a cigarette butts, a military-style jacket left like a breadcrumb on a trail. They thought they were smarter than the men in the badges. They always do. But they never account for the one thing they cannot control, the truth. It always has a way of rising to the surface, even if it takes 50 years to find its way home. You look at the suspects, and you see the rot that hides in plain sight. A cook, a manager, a father shrouded in rumors of gambling and secret lives. The human capacity for cruelty is boundless. Some claim the girl's own father could have done it, a rumor that stings like salt in a fresh wound. But then you have a man who dies in prison, a monster who terrorized his own children, forced them to listen to stories of his own depravity, and made them dump bags into the river. You have to wonder, what kind of darkness lives inside a man that he needs to brag about his own evil to his kin? It makes my skin crawl, and I have seen just about everything. Stephanie was denied her 19th birthday. She was denied the chance to love, the chance to live, the chance to be anything other than a memory in a police file. And the frustration, the absolute, crushing frustration of the investigator who has to stand there year after year, watching the trail go cold, seeing the technology lag behind the brutality of the crime. They are chasing ghosts, and ghosts do not leave fingerprints. But let us be clear about one thing. The killer was not just a stranger in the night. The killer was someone who walked among us. Someone who could smile, someone who could clock in for a shift, someone who could pretend that they were a human being just like you and me. That is the true horror. It is not the monster under the bed. It is the monster at the table next to you. Years passed, the seasons changed, and the pain rippled forward through the family, touching people who were not even born when she was alive. That is the tragedy of murder. It is not a singular event that happens to one person. It is a slow-motion explosion that destroys everything in its radius for generations. You can solve a case, you can put a name to a face, you can even put a man in a cell, but you can never, ever fix what was broken. You can never bring back the light that was stolen from that girl. It is a heavy burden, the pursuit of justice. You search for the truth because it is the only thing left to give. It is a debt we owe the dead. And I tell you, until the truth is found, that girl is still out there, waiting for someone to finally listen. Human beings are strange creatures. They commit the most unthinkable acts for the most trivial reasons imaginable. And yet, they expect the world to remain silent about the wreckage they leave behind. I have spent a lifetime looking into the eyes of those who have seen too much, and I have learned one absolute truth. People are not who they pretend to be when the cameras are off and the doors are locked. You are looking for a story, but what you are really looking for is the truth. And the truth is often buried under a mountain of convenient lies. My. You have to be kidding me if you think this case is as simple as a woman walking away from her life. Let us look at the facts as they are presented, and let us look at them through the cold, hard lens of an investigator who has seen every trick in the book. We have a woman, Melissa Casillas, a mother, a wife. a professional working for a facility that deals with matters of national security. She vanishes on a Thursday in June of 2025. Her husband, Mark, claims she left of her own volition, citing financial desperation and the pressure of a crumbling life. Her family, the Mondragons, see something much darker, something that smells of foul play, of a man who knows far more than he is willing to tell. I tell you in my experience, the person who is most eager to provide you with a theory is usually the person who has the most to hide. Consider the scene at the home. It is quiet. It is too quiet. We have a vehicle left in the driveway, keys on the table, and 2 cellular phones that have been factory reset. A factory reset is not a casual act. It is a deliberate, calculated step taken by someone who understands technology and intends to erase their footprint. If Melissa had truly intended to walk away and start a new life, why wipe the devices so thoroughly that even an expert would struggle to recover a single byte of data? That does not sound like a woman fleeing for her life. That sounds like someone ensuring that their past cannot be reconstructed. Or perhaps it sounds like someone else trying to manufacture a narrative of a voluntary disappearance. Then there's the husband, Mark, a man who claims to be a professional outfitter, a man who knows how to read the terrain. Yet he seems strangely incapable of reading the situation unfolding in his own living room. He brings up tire tracks. He brings up potential affairs with unnamed contractors. He brings up insurance policies and financial ruins, all while his own story shifts like sand in the wind. And those boots, the ones with the fresh mud sitting right next to a drop of blood that tests positive in a preliminary sweep, he dismisses it. He explains it away with the casual confidence of a man who believes he has outsmarted the investigator. But a detective does not listen to what a suspect says. A detective listens to what they do. And what Mark did was immediately attempt to control the narrative, to dictate where the police should look and, more importantly, where they should not look. The psychological weight on the victim is profound. Melissa was a mother, a woman who had endured the trauma of her daughter's accident and was looking toward a future of stability. To suggest that she would abandon that daughter, the very person she was planning to build a new life with in Albuquerque, flies in the face of everything we know about human attachment. Does a mother simply vanish, leaving her child in the dark, unless she is forced? Or is there a version of Melissa that was so utterly broken by the deception surrounding her that she chose the ultimate escape? The mind is a dark place, and when you back a person into a corner, you never know what they might do to find a way out. Then we have the witnesses like the man who claimed to have seen a decapitated body, or the mysterious woman from Colorado who appeared out of thin air to gift a graduation present and then vanished into the ether when questioned by authorities. This is not a case of a simple missing person. This is a case of competing realities. You have one side of a family painting a portrait of a victim, and another side painting a portrait of a runaway. They are both convinced of their own version of the truth, but they are both blinded by their own pain. I have seen this before. Grief is a terrible thing, but suspicion is a poison that destroys everything it touches. We are left with a woman caught in the machinery of something much larger, perhaps. People in her position, those with access to sensitive information, do not just disappear without someone noticing, unless the people doing the noticing are the ones who want them to disappear. It is a terrifying thought, is it not? That in this modern age, with all our tracking, our digital footprints, and our surveillance, a person can be scrubbed from existence as if they never were. But the evidence remains. The struggle, the lies, the blood, the fear. The investigation, as it stands, is a tragedy of missed opportunities. The police, seemingly paralyzed by the contradictions and the lack of a clear crime scene, allowed the trail to go cold while the family argued over the details. It is a classic failure of procedure. If you do not treat every potential lead with the same level of suspicion, you are not doing police work. You are merely documenting a tragedy. My. If there's a missing piece to this puzzle, and there's always a missing piece, it is somewhere in those digital archives that no one has managed to properly crack. Or perhaps it is in the silence of those who think they are clever enough to keep a secret for the rest of their lives. But I will tell you this, the truth does not stay buried forever. It has a way of rising to the surface just when you think you have finally escaped it. Human beings are strange creatures. They commit the most heinous acts for the most trivial reasons imaginable. And yet, they always seem surprised when the heavy hand of justice finally descends upon them. I tell you, you have to be kidding me if you think you can hide behind the comfortable facade of a small town. Winsboro, Texas, a place where everybody knows everybody. Or at least that is what they tell themselves to sleep at night. But let me be clear. In a town where the circle is that small, secrets do not just sit still. They rot, they fester, and eventually they kill. My. Look at the case of Brittany McGlone, a 19-year-old girl with a future, dreams of nursing school, working double shifts until the exhaustion becomes her shadow. She broke her routine on that 4th day of May, 2007. A simple deviation. A change in the plan that led her straight into the maw of a nightmare. She ends up in her boyfriend Jeff Stogner's bed, and by 3:30 in the afternoon, she is gone. Bludgeoned to death. The scene was cold, surgical. Whoever did this had the audacity, the sickening composure, to take a shower in the house while she lay broken in the bedroom. That is not just a killer. That is someone who felt entitled to the space, someone who believed they were untouchable. You look at the players, and you see the typical parade of suspects. Jeff, the boyfriend with the dark aesthetic, the one with a motive to keep her quiet, the one whose alibi felt like it was constructed out of wet cardboard. Then you have the grandfather, James McGlone, a man hiding a life of depravity behind a mask of familial duty. He preyed on her, and the moment she started to speak the truth, she became a liability. But the universe has a way of mocking our theories. The polygraphs are passed, the timelines are checked, and suddenly the investigators are staring at a blank wall. And that is when the truth, usually so ugly, decides to show its face. Enter Chad Carr, a man who is nothing more than a ghost in the periphery of Brittany's life, a hanger-on dating the boyfriend's sister. 25 years old, no ambition, no purpose, just a vacuum of morality. My gut tells me something about these men, and I have spent a lifetime reading them. They do not kill because they are forced. They kill because they enjoy the power of erasing someone else. You look at Chad's past, the 2001 assault on that woman, Debbie, with a jackhandle. The same weapon, the same pattern. He was a man who practiced violence like a hobby. When investigators finally looked at him, they found a man who smelled of soap that did not belong to him, a man whose alibi was as porous as a sieve. The tragedy of this, the part that keeps you awake, is the incompetence that followed. A grand jury that never heard the full story. A system that fumbled the ball and let a monster walk free, leaving a family to mourn in the silence of an unsolved grave. You hear the stories of his potential crimes against animals, the pattern of sexual aggression against his own ex-wife, and you realize that justice is not always a straight line. It is a jagged, broken path. The detectives, Sheriff Cole, and Captain Chilson, they are still digging. They're still looking at that DNA from the shower drain. A silent witness that refuses to be silenced forever. People say the truth will out. I have been in enough rooms with enough killers to know that the truth is often buried under layers of pride, stupidity, and fear. Chad Carr never offered a flat-out denial. Why would he? He was too busy managing his own skin. He thought he was smarter than the law, smarter than the people who loved Brittany. He was wrong, of course. He is just another man who thought he could vanish into the small-town woodwork. But he left behind a trail of sorrow that spans nearly 2 decades. Brittany McGlone was a daughter, a student, a human being with a pulse and a future. She was not a prop in someone else's sick game. She deserved better than a shower-taking coward. And she deserves better than a cold case file gathering dust in a sheriff's office. I tell you, it is enough to make you lose faith in humanity, if you had any left to begin with. But you keep going. You push, you investigate, and you never, ever stop until the door slams shut on the people who think they can get away with murder. Because someone knows. Someone always knows. And the truth, no matter how long it takes, has a way of finding its way home. Human beings are strange creatures. They often lose their lives for the most trivial, senseless reasons one can imagine. My. You see, when a man is found, particularly in the state this young man was, the job of an investigator is not to assume. It is to observe, to document, and to demand the truth. But in this case, the authorities in Fresno failed at the most fundamental level. They saw a man, Spencer Irwin, found under conditions that would make any seasoned detective hold their breath. And they labeled it an overdose before the body was even cold. I tell you, that is a shortcut to injustice. Spencer Irwin was 30 years old. He was a son, a man struggling with his own demons, yes. But he was not a statistic to be discarded in the dirt of a loading dock. His mother, Kelly, knew him. She knew he did not fit the narrative they tried to force upon her. When the authorities tell a grieving mother that her son died of natural causes because they could not find a smoking gun, they are not practicing law enforcement. They are practicing convenience. You have to be kidding me. To decide a death is natural without a proper autopsy. Without a toxicological report that actually confirms your theory is professional negligence of the highest order. Consider the scene. A man found naked. The police offer a theory about paradoxical undressing, as if it were a cold winter night in the mountains. But it was July in California. The heat would not strip a man of his clothes. Something else was at work. Then there's the matter of the snow angel pattern in the dirt. It is a haunting image, symmetrical and peculiar. An expert would tell you that such patterns do not suggest a man dying of a cardiac event while trying to cool off. They suggest something external, something that does not make sense. And when things do not make sense in a homicide investigation, you do not turn away. You dig deeper. The internal struggle of Spencer was one of kindness. He was a man who, despite his own suffering, sought to lift up those who had nothing, like the homeless individuals he encountered. He was a beacon of light for others, yet in his final moments, the very people sworn to protect the public saw only a transient to be overlooked. It is a profound irony that cuts to the bone. They saw a body, not a person. They saw an overdose, not a potential crime scene. They denied his mother the dignity of an investigation, and in doing so, they allowed the trail to go cold, letting precious hours and days slip into the abyss of lost evidence. Then there is the matter of Angel Gonzalez and the white Kia Soul. A vehicle seen at the site, a man found in Spencer's apartment under suspicious circumstances, and a story that shifted like sand in the wind. These are not merely coincidences. These are leads. A detective looks for the thread that pulls the whole sweater apart. Was Spencer in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was there something more sinister lurking in the shadow of those dumpsters? We may never have the definitive answers because the crime scene was not treated as one. That is the tragedy here. The truth is fragile, and once it is trampled by apathy, it is damn near impossible to put back together. Kelly Irwin had to become the detective that the city failed to provide. That is a heavy burden for a mother to carry. But it is the only way she could honor the life of her son. Justice is not a gift. It is something you have to fight for tooth and nail, against a system that would much rather keep its eyes closed.
The family first met her. She struck them as being very quiet, exceptionally sweet and gentle. This quiet demeanor stood out in stark contrast to Steve's gigantic, boisterous personality, making her seem almost like a wallflower next to his vibrant energy. Despite their differences in temperament, Steve was absolutely certain that she was the one for him, and the couple quickly became inseparable. They were openly affectionate with one another, always walking arm in arm, with Steve constantly hugging her, squeezing her and kissing her with pure joy. Rosie felt incredibly happy for her brother, knowing that anyone Steve loved would be fully embraced by the entire family. It was not long before their relationship progressed to the next level, and after they had gotten to know each other quite a bit more, Steve used his persuasive charm to convince Lana to move in with him in Charlotte. Steve could be very convincing when he spoke from the heart, and soon they began building a life together, adding some wonderful new additions to their household. The first dog that Steve and Lana brought into their home was Guinness, a graceful Italian greyhound, and because they fell completely in love with the unique breed, they soon decided to welcome a second Italian greyhound named Sadie. With Lana by his side, Steve finally felt as though he had found the missing piece of his life's puzzle, always speaking of her with the utmost adoration and affectionately referring to her as his Lana, Sue. He could never hide the deep feelings he possessed for her, showing everyone that he was very much in love, and his family believed that he had found a certain sense of peace and a well-grounded foundation. With her, Steve Clayton had come to North Carolina looking for a fresh chapter, and he had managed to find a beautiful new future. 6 years after dancing with his sister at her wedding and dreaming of his own happiness, he was finally about to marry the love of his life. It was a lovely, crisp day in November 2013, when family and friends traveled to North Carolina to stand by his side and enjoy the magnificent celebration. The wedding took place right at their beautiful house in Charlotte, creating an intimate and gorgeous event where both the bride and groom were beaming with pure love. Shortly after their wedding, the happy couple decided to relocate once more, moving into their forever home just over the state border in South Carolina. Situated on the picturesque banks of Lake Wylie, the property looked like something lifted directly from a scenic postcard, featuring a gorgeous ocean blue home that sat beautifully on a large piece of pristine lakefront property. Together, Steve and Lana set about refurbishing their new residence, decorating the spacious rooms with Steve's extensive collection of unique artworks and historical antiques. Objects were very personal to Steve, and he took great pride in his possessions, ensuring that every piece displayed in their home was special in some way. The move to the lake also allowed them to fully indulge in their shared love for nature. And if there was ever a fun outdoors activity happening nearby, Steve was guaranteed to be the first one there, completely gung-ho and enthusiastic. Their relocation to South Carolina also brought them much closer to Steve's extended family, including his nephew Nick French, who had married Steve's niece in 2010. Nick and his family spent a vast amount of time hanging out with Steve and Lana, regularly going out to wonderful dinners, attending lively concerts, and celebrating special events during every major holiday. The lake house was also located just a convenient 30-minute drive from Lana's own son and grandchildren, meaning the house was frequently filled with the joyful sounds of children. Steve had an extraordinary way with children because he had always remained a child at heart himself, never hesitating to get down on the living room floor to play games and make the kids laugh. With the grandchildren around, there was never a dull moment in the Clayton household, as captured in family videos where Lana would film Steve attempting to humorously describe how to play the game of limbo to her twin granddaughters. Steve would laughingly explain that you had to go under a stick by getting real low, describing it as a fun dance while the twins watched happily. Steve thoroughly enjoyed playing all kinds of games, whether it was a classic game of Scrabble or a silly, messy children's game where you had to spin a spinner and turn a handle to see if you would get A. Surprise. He was like a huge, lovable teddy bear to the children, who loved to climb all over him and play with him constantly, while Lana was always game to join in on the festive family fun. 5 years into their marriage, Steve and Lana appear to be thriving in every possible way, enjoying their beautiful home, their pets, and their loving family network. However, in June of 2018, a sudden and unexpected shadow fell over their happy life when Steve suddenly fell deeply ill. He began complaining of intense dizziness, describing a terrible sensation of vertigo that made it difficult for him to maintain his balance. He mentioned that his ear hurt, that he felt incredibly nauseous, and he even started getting sick out in the yard, causing his family to feel immense concern for his well-being. Steve recalled that he had been working out in his beloved garden when the symptoms struck him out of nowhere, leading him to believe that perhaps he had simply suffered a severe case of sunstroke from the summer heat. As an experienced nurse, Lana stepped in to manage his care, advising that the absolute best thing for him was complete bed rest. Steve would later mention that he remembered lying down to rest, and the very next time he opened his eyes, an astonishing 36 hours had passed by. Worried by this strange turn of events, Rosie called Lana to check on her brother and find out what could possibly cause someone to lose such a significant amount of time. Lana reassured her that Steve was going to be fine, explaining that she was watching him closely and making sure he was safe, which gave the family great comfort given her professional background as a nurse. It seemed as though Steve's boundless, larger-than-life energy had simply caught up with him, requiring a period of deep rest to fully recover. Just 2 weeks later, it appeared that Lana's dedicated treatment had worked wonders, as Steve was completely back to his old, energetic self, throwing a spectacular party to celebrate the 4th of July. The celebration was just as grand and joyous as any party they had ever hosted at the lake house, with Steve acting as his normal, deeply affectionate self. He grabbed Lana to dance with her in the middle of the celebration, prompting the rest of the family to join in, creating a beautiful scene of love and happiness that made everyone believe their lives would be long, peaceful, and filled with joy. Tragically, on July 21st, 2018, the peace of the lake house was permanently shattered when an urgent call was placed at York County 911 emergency system. Police units quickly arrived on the scene, and the body camera footage recorded by responding Officer Sergeant Day captured the somber atmosphere that awaited them, walking through the grand front door of the ocean blue home. The officers discovered Steve lying motionless at the absolute bottom of the magnificent staircase, and it was immediately clear that he had passed away. The responding officers spoke in low, respectful whispers because Lana was just around the corner, visibly distraught and weeping over the loss of her husband. Sergeant Day approached Lana gently, identifying himself and explaining that he would remain with her until the coroner arrived to handle the necessary arrangements. Lana, overwhelmed with grief, explained to the officer that Steve had been suffering from terrible dizziness for the past 2 days, noting that he stood up that morning, became intensely dizzy and collapsed. She mentioned that she had attempted to move him and care for him, having been outside mowing the lawn briefly before discovering the tragedy. Despite her medical training, the suddenness of the situation left her unable to render further aid, causing her to run out to wave down a passing motorist to call for emergency help. Steve's nephew, Nick French, who was on duty as a police officer at the time, received the heartbreaking news via phone call from his mother, leaving him in absolute disbelief as he rushed down to the property as quickly as possible. The news traveled quickly to Rosie, 700 miles away, who collapsed in tears upon hearing that her big brother and hero was suddenly gone. Nick and his family rallied tightly around Lana, tried to comfort her through the unimaginable pain of finding her husband on the ground. Lana expressed her fear that Steve's severe vertigo had caused a fatal fall down the grand staircase, prompting Sergeant Day to carefully inspect the area for any signs of a struggle or foul play. Upon inspecting the upper levels of the expansive house, the officer noted that everything appeared orderly, with no signs of an intruder or physical conflict. In the master bedroom, the bed sheets were rumpled, but there was nothing to suggest anything other than a medical event. When the coroner examined Steve, no external contusions or bruises were found to indicate a fall down the stairs, leading to preliminary theory that Steve had suffered a sudden, massive heart attack. The coroner noted that the distinct coloration across the top of Steve's chest was a common, indicator of a cardiac event, and Sergeant Day gently shared this assessment with Lana, advising her to find peace in the thought that it was simply the day that nature had chosen. While Lana processed the tragic news, Nick and his family stepped in to help clean and organize the home to ensure she would be comfortable staying there. However, when they went upstairs to the master bedroom, they were met with a powerful, unsettling odor of human neglect and heavy fluid stains across the center of the mattress. The condition of the bed raised immediate, troubling questions for Nick, who realized that for a mattress to be so heavily soaked, Steve must have been incapacitated and unable to leave the bed for several days. Realizing the mattress needed to be removed immediately, they carried the heavy, soiled object out of the house. When Rosie spoke with Lana over the phone later that evening, she inquired deeply about the timeline of Steve's illness, asking why no one had been notified sooner if he had been unwell for days. Lana claimed that Steve had seemed to be improving and had heavily misplaced his cell phone a week prior, explaining why he hadn't reached out. This claim struck Rosie as incredibly alarming, as her brother was a meticulous man who was never, ever without his phone. A sense of deep unease began to settle over the family, a feeling that something sinister had occurred in the quiet lakeside home. When Rosie questioned Lana about Steve's legal will, Lana claimed that no such document existed, announcing that arrangements had already been made for Steve to be cremated and for a memorial service to be held on August 4th, 2018. A deeply emotional memorial service was held at the home, where family and friends gathered to celebrate a life well lived while dealing with a profound sense of sorrow. During the service, the family was shocked to discover that Lana had already completely cleared out all of Steve's personal belongings, empty hangers lining the closet where his clothes used to be, and many of his valuable watches, jewelry, and his wedding ring were entirely missing. The idea that Steve, a highly successful accountant who was extraordinarily meticulous with his finances, would leave no legal made absolutely no sense to his loved ones. Feeling that the pieces of the puzzle did not align, the family contacted the medical examiner's office to formally request a thorough toxicology report. Detective Motes of the York County Sheriff's Office was assigned to look into the family's concerns. And while the initial autopsy report continued to point toward natural heart disease, everyone remained on pins and needles waiting for the final chemical analysis of Steve's blood. When the comprehensive toxicology report finally returned from the laboratory, the results were absolutely stunning, revealing traces of various sedatives, but most notably, an incredibly high concentration of a chemical called tetrahydrozoline. The detectives recognized this substance as the active ingredient commonly found in over-the-counter eye drops, a medication that is completely safe when applied topically but highly toxic if ingested. In small amounts, the chemical causes severe nausea, dizziness, and confusion, but in large quantities, it completely shuts down the central nervous system, drastically restricting blood flow to vital organs and triggering a fatal cardiac event. Finding the substance on a nearby dresser away from the bed made it clear that Steve could not have administered it to himself in his weakened state, transforming the case into a formal homicide investigation. 5 weeks after her husband's passing, Lana Clayton was brought in for formal questioning by detectives regarding the medications found in Steve's system. The substance was completely colorless, odorless, and tasteless, making it an undetectable poison when mixed into a beverage. When the detectives pressed Lana about how such a lethal level of the chemical entered Steve's body, she initially claimed that Steve frequently placed eye drops directly into his morning coffee to alleviate minor ailments, knowing it caused digestive distress. As the interview progressed, Lana began to paint a dark, complex picture of their marriage, claiming that behind closed doors, Steve possessed a harsh temperament and would frequently subject her to verbal updates and emotional strain. Following the interview, authorities executed a detailed search of the residence, looking for any physical evidence or residue that would explain the ingestion of the poison. During the search, Lana requested to speak with Detective Moats once more, dropping a massive bombshell as she confessed to deliberately squeezing an entire bottle of the potent eye drops directly into Steve's drinking water during a moment of intense anger. She claimed she had been told by an acquaintance that the substance would merely cause mild illness, and she expressed sudden panic over whether her actions had inadvertently caused his passing. The damning confession provided the authorities with the clarity they needed, but before an arrest could be made the following morning, neighbors discovered that Lana had attempted to harm herself within the home. Emergency personnel located her unconscious, rushing her to a local medical facility where she was treated, stabilized, and immediately placed under arrest on formal charges of murder and food tampering. Nick received the news of the confession and arrest while driving, pulling over immediately as the reality of the situation hit him like a physical blow, while Rosie cried out in grief over phone. On January 16, 2020, the legal proceedings reached a conclusion when Lana accepted a formal plea deal, entering a plea of guilt to the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter along with tampering charges. Throughout the sentencing, Lana maintained that she never intended to cause a fatal outcome, asserting she merely sought a minor form of retaliation, a claim that Steve's family and extensive network of friends completely rejected. Those who had been mentored by Steve came forward to testify to his gentle, incredibly generous soul, proving that he was entirely incapable of harming anyone and that the allegations against his character were entirely false. The scientific data from the toxicologist further revealed that Steve had tragically suffered over a period of 3 days, indicating that the poison had been administered continuously little by little, leaving him too weak to seek help in a house devoid of a landline telephone. The prosecution argued that the act was entirely deliberate and premeditated, motivated by the realization that under state law, the absence of formal would result in the entirety of Steve's substantial wealth passing directly to his spouse. At the conclusion of the trial, 53-year-old Lana Clayton was sentenced to 25 years in a correctional facility, bringing a sense of legal justice to a heartbroken family. Though the loss of Steve left an irreplaceable void, his family chose to focus on honoring the magnificent legacy of the man who had been their hero. They remembered his booming voice, his hilarious exclamation of hello, 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 and his ability to completely light up any room he entered with his over-the-top, generous personality. Steve had been an amazing brother, uncle, and friend, and though he was stolen from everyone who loved him, his bright spirit, laughter, and enduring impact on the lives of countless young men would never be forgotten. The story of Steve Clayton was one defined by a brilliant, undeniable light, a narrative of a successful and profoundly generous businessman whose life echoed with an infectious, booming greeting that never failed to lift the spirits of anyone within earshot. Hello, hello, hello. He was a man of immense stature, both in his physical presence and the magnitude of his heart, possessing a unique capacity to make everyone feel secure, cherished, and deeply valued. In the late chapters of his life, this extraordinary man met a nurse with a heart that initially seemed as large and giving as his own, a woman who struck those around her as being very quiet, but very sweet and very nice. It was a classic tale of opposites attracting, a vibrant, larger-than-life force of nature falling head over heels for a gentle wallflower. He could not hide the profound feelings he had for her, displaying an open, vulnerable devotion that showed he was very much in love with her. Yet, the beautiful tapestry they attempted to weave together would eventually unravel under the most unsettling circumstances, giving way to a quiet horror that crept into their household. When a mysterious, draining sickness consumes their marriage, those who loved Steve the most were left with a haunting realization, a collective whisper that grew into an undeniable truth. We just knew that there was something was very wrong. In the end, the immense wealth he had accumulated through decades of hard work offered no shield against the darkness that invaded his sanctuary, proving once and for all that money is no protection. and that this was absolutely not a natural death. To truly understand the depth of the legacy that Steve Clayton left behind, one must travel back to a day of pure celebration, a day filled with the warmth of family and the promise of a bright future. It was March 10th, 2007, in the vibrant city of Miami, Florida. The air was thick with anticipation and the sweet scent of coastal blossoms, marking a major milestone for a close-knit family. It was a big day for the bride, Rosemary Clayton, affectionately known to everyone as Rosie, and her entire family. She was finally marrying the love of her life, a wonderful man named William Leslie, and the joy in the air was palpable. Yet, beneath the celebration lay a tender, lingering sorrow that threatened to overshadow the walk down the aisle. Merely 11 months prior to the wedding day, the family had suffered a devastating loss when their beloved father passed away, leaving a void that felt entirely impossible to fill. Knowing the immense weight of the moment, Rosie turned to the one person who had always been her rock, her oldest brother, 52-year-old Steve Clayton, proudly asking him if he would step in to take their father's place. It was a request met with deep emotion, bringing a cascade of tears from everyone involved. For Rosie could not imagine anybody else standing in place for her dad on the most important day of her life. When the moment arrived for the ceremony to begin, Steve stood tall at the back of the chapel, offering his arm to his younger sister with a steady, reassuring smile. As they walked together toward the altar, the congregation watched in quiet awe of the bond between them. When the traditional question was posed at the gathering, asking who gave this woman to be married to this man, Steve spoke clearly, his voice carrying the resonant weight of family honor and deep love, stating that he did so in the sacred memory of his father. It was an incredibly sentimental, beautifully poignant experience to be gathered for something so profoundly special where there. Father was not physically present, yet Steve managed to channel their father's spirit perfectly. With their father's passing, Steve had officially become the undisputed head of the family. Though he had never had children of his own, he had naturally and effortlessly occupied a father figure role to his siblings for as long as any of them could remember. The roots of this protective, nurturing instinct ran deep into their shared childhood. When their father and mother were first married, Steve was just a small boy of about 2 or 3 years old. Over the years, the household grew, and he eventually found himself surrounded by 4 younger sisters, with Rosie being the youngest of the pack. Because Steve was 10 years older than Rosie, there really was not a moment in her entire existence when he was not a foundational presence in her life. To her, Steve was not just a big brother. He was her ultimate hero, embodying everything a little girl could ever possibly want in an older sibling. He was athletic, driven, and fiercely protective, playing football and wrestling with intense determination during his high school years, attributes that made him seem entirely bigger than life to his adoring younger sister. As Steve transitioned from adolescence into adulthood, his natural drive and sharp intellect came to the forefront. After graduating from high school, he attended college and earned a degree in finance, a field where his analytical mind and keen perception allowed him to mature quickly into a shrewd, highly successful businessman. Recognizing a significant need in the healthcare industry, Steve partnered with a trusted associate to launch a visionary company called Physical Therapy Resources. Through relentless hard work, strategic planning, and an unwavering commitment to quality care, the venture blossomed from a local startup into a massive national company, establishing state-of-the-art physical therapy centers all across the country. It was during this period of professional expansion that Steve met a dedicated healthcare worker named Lana Walsh. They happened to cross paths within the very hospital system where his company operated, and through their daily professional interactions, they formed a deep, lasting friendship. Steve's business acumen eventually led to an incredibly lucrative opportunity to sell his interest in the national company, allowing him to achieve a lifelong personal milestone. His ultimate goal had always been to retire by the age of 40. while he missed that exact target by a single year, retiring instead at the age of 41, the monumental sale freed him completely from the daily grind of corporate life, leaving him with a vast fortune and a clean slate to pursue whatever his heart desired. With his financial future entirely secure, Steve chose to dedicate his retirement to a cause that brought him immense fulfillment, giving back to the community and lifting up the next generation. He began to mentor a large, diverse group of young men, using his own wealth of knowledge and resources to help them launch their own businesses or assist them in discovering the true direction they wanted their lives to take. He was extraordinarily generous not only with his vast financial resources, but, more importantly, with his personal time, ensuring that he always made his family his absolute top priority. This light-hearted, joyous side of his personality was frequently captured on home videos, including a treasured clip filmed by Rosie where Steve could be seen playfully teasing their beloved Uncle Max. It was a special dynamic, contrasting beautifully with the memory of their father, who was historically a much more serious, reserved man during these family gatherings. His sisters would often laughingly question where all his energy and success came from, to which Steve would simply smile, shrug his broad shoulders, and jokingly claim he had no idea. When Rosie married William, it was Steve's irrepressible good humor and vibrant energy that transformed the reception into an unforgettable celebration, cementing his status as the true life and soul of the occasion. He was always the very first guy to get up from his seat to give a toast at any gathering, eschewing written scripts or rehearsed lines in favor of an ad-libby delivery that flowed straight from his generous heart. Standing before the wedding guests, he used his humor as a clever shield to keep from being completely overcome by the deep emotions of the day. Looking toward his new brother-in-law, Steve expressed his profound gratitude, jokingly stating that he could not look directly at him without tearing up, before thanking William from the bottom of his heart for making his sister happier than she had ever been. Steve was never a man to hide his true emotions, and as the toast continued, his voice softened with reverence that silenced the room. He shared with the guests a sacred promise, revealing that before their father passed away, he had looked at Steve and explicitly told him to take care of his sister, to honor her, and to remind her of how deeply she was loved. Stepping forward into the role of the family protector, Steve paused to compose himself, noting with a smile that he needed to get serious for a moment, before looking at the newlyweds and declaring them to be wonderful companions and perfect partners. Following the moving speeches, the evening transitioned to the traditional father-daughter dance, a moment where Steve once again stepped in to honor his sister. As they walked out onto the center of the dance floor and prepared to move to the music, a sudden stillness fell over the room. Before the melody began to play, the family unveiled a powerful, surprise audio recording of their dearly departed father, his voice echoing beautifully through the speakers. In the recording, their father spoke directly to the memory of his children, reminiscing about the beautiful days when they would climb onto his knee and say, "Daddy, I love you," expressing how deeply he missed those innocent times because he loved them just as much. It was a breathtaking tribute that brought tears to every eye in the room. Throughout that entire monumental day, Steve had executed a multitude of monumental duties with absolute grace. He had acted as a father, served as the best man, provided the evening's entertainment, and functioned as a steady anchor who kept everyone calm, grounded, and laughing. He was a natural leader, possessing a rare, magnetic charm that could put anyone at ease. Yet, despite his immense professional success and his incredibly tight-knit network of loyal family and friends, Steve's personal romantic life had historically been quite rocky. He had spent years searching for a partner who possessed the same level of focus, determination, love, and care that he brought to the table, a remarkably tall order for anyone to fill. Now, reaching the age of 52, his family had begun to figure that it would take an extraordinarily special human being to completely sweep him off his feet as he required someone he could truly connect with on a deep emotional, intellectual, and spiritual level. 3 years after that beautiful wedding, in the late months of 2009, that elusive connection finally materialized. Seeking a refreshing change of pace from his familiar life in the sunshine state of Florida, Steve made the conscious decision to relocate north to the scenic landscapes of North Carolina. He was a man who possessed a deep, lifelong passion for physical activity, loving nothing more than long walks, working in the garden, and immersing himself in anything that had to do with the great outdoors. The move to North Carolina granted him the perfect opportunity to indulge his passion, allowing him to spend a significant portion of his days out in the fresh air. Within just a few short months of his relocation, Steve called his family to enthusiastically announce that he had met someone incredibly special. His siblings immediately noticed a brilliant, rejuvenated glow in his demeanor, a vibrant happiness that had been noticeably missing from his life for quite some time, and his excitement was completely undeniable. The woman who had captured his heart was Lana Walsh, 12 years his junior. She was a quiet healthcare professional who had grown up in the rural landscapes of Oklahoma. When she was first introduced to Steve's energetic family, she struck them as being very quiet, but very sweet, displaying a gentle, reserved nature that stood out in stark contrast to Steve's gigantic, room-filling personality. While Steve was boisterous and always the center of attention, Lana was much more akin to a quiet wallflower, content to observe the world from the sidelines. Despite these massive differences in temperament, Steve was completely certain that she was the absolute one for him. When they were together, they were remarkably affectionate, always walking arm in arm, with Steve constantly hugging her, squeezing her affectionately, and kissing her in front of the world. Seeing her brother so completely radiant brought an immense sense of happiness to Rosie, who resolved to warmly embrace anyone who brought such profound joy into her hero's life. It was not long before their deep connection prompted Steve to ask Lana to move in with him, after they had spent a considerable amount of time getting to know one another's histories and values. Steve utilized his naturally persuasive, charming personality to convince her to leave her old routines behind and join him in the bustling city of Charlotte, North Carolina. As they established their shared household, they decided to expand their family by bringing home some beloved animal companions. The very first pet they welcomed into their lives was an elegant Italian greyhound named Guinness. They quickly fell completely in love with the unique, affectionate breed, which inspired them to look for a second canine companion, a sweet female Italian greyhound whom they beautifully named Sadie. With Lana by his side and their loyal dogs running through the yard, Steve finally felt as though he had discovered the vital, missing piece of his life's puzzle. He always had the most wonderful, glowing things to say about her, affectionately referring to her to his friends as his beautiful Lana Sue. His deep love was written across his face, and he found himself remarkably well-grounded, experiencing a serene sense of peace that had eluded him during his high-flying corporate years. Steve Clayton had come to the hills of North Carolina, seeking a simple change from his old life, and in doing so, he had discovered an entirely new, beautiful future. 6 years after he had danced with his sister at her wedding, dreaming of the day he would find his own eternal companion, Steve was finally about to marry the love of his life. It was a lovely, crisp day in November of 2013 when many members of the Clayton family traveled up from Florida to North Carolina, eager to share in his immense joy and celebrate the formal union of Steve and his devoted nurse. The wedding took place directly on the grounds of their beautiful home in Charlotte, transformed into an intimate, elegant venue for the occasion. It was a spectacularly beautiful event, filled with an underlying current of profound affection that seemed to beam directly from the faces of both the bride and the groom. Shortly after exchanging their vows, the newlyweds decided to take the next step in their journey together, embarking on a search for their ultimate forever home. They found exactly what they were looking for just over the state border in the picturesque region, of South Carolina, purchasing a magnificent property situated directly on the scenic banks of Lake Wylie. The estate looked like something taken directly from a travel postcard, featuring a gorgeous, ocean blue custom home that sat majestically on a sprawling piece of pristine lakefront property. With great enthusiasm, the couple set about completely refurbishing and customizing their new lakeside sanctuary, decorating the spacious rooms with Steve's extensive, lifelong collection of fine artworks and rare antiques. Steve was the kind of sentimental person for whom material objects carried deep personal meaning, and he took an immense amount of pride in displaying his unique possessions, each of which possessed a distinct story or historical significance. The relocation to the lake allowed them to fully indulge their shared love for the natural world. And if there was ever a fun, adventurous outdoor activity happening on the water, Steve was guaranteed to be the very first person to lace up his shoes, completely gung-ho and eager to participate. Additionally, their new home brought them much closer to Steve's extended family, including his nephew-in-law, who had married Steve's niece in 2000 in Muoy and had quickly formed a close bond with his uncle. The family spent countless weekends hanging out at the lakeside estate, going out for wonderful dinners, attending live music concerts, and celebrating every single holiday together in an atmosphere of pure joy. The home was also located a convenient 30-minute drive from Lana's adult son and her young grandchildren, and the couple never said no to an opportunity to do some babysitting. Steve possessed a natural, magical way with young children, largely because he had always remained a big, joyful child at heart himself. He was the exact kind of uncle and grandfather who would immediately drop down onto the living room floor, rolling around and playing classic childhood games like Pop Goes the Weasel to the absolute delight of the little ones, with the children running through the halls. There was never a single dull moment in the Clayton household. Home videos from this golden era showed Lana filming Steve as he hilariously attempted to describe the mechanics of a limbo line to her twin granddaughters. With the twins watching intently, Steve would laughingly explain that a stick would be held up, and he would have to bend his large frame backward, going real low to slide completely under the stick, emphasizing that it was a wonderful game and a joyous dance. Lana was always completely tickled by his playful antics, even when the twins were far more interested in eating their ice cream than watching their grandfather's dance demonstrations. Steve simply enjoyed playing all kinds of games, whether it was an intense, intellectual round of Scrabble or a silly, messy children's game like Pie Face. In one cherished video recording, Steve could be seen sitting at the table with the kids, laughing heartily as they spun the game spinner and instructed him to turn the plastic handles a certain number of times while placing his chin directly on the target. He was a massive, lovable teddy bear of a man, and the children absolutely loved to play with him, constantly hanging on his arms and climbing onto his shoulders. Lana was always an active, willing participant in these moments of family fun, joining in the laughter as the game mechanisms triggered, creating beautiful, lasting memories of a family that appeared to be completely thriving 5 years into their marriage. However, the beautiful picture of health and happiness began to fracture unpredictably in June of 2000. Quite suddenly, Steve fell intensely ill, complaining of severe dizziness and a disorienting sensation of vertigo that made it difficult for him to stand upright. He confided in his family that his ear hurt terribly, that he felt deeply nauseous, and the illness became so acute that he began getting violently sick right out in the yard. It was a heartbreaking sight for those who knew his usual robust strength, though they were aware he had experienced minor issues with vertigo in the past. Recalling the onset of the affliction, Steve remembered that he had simply been working out in his beloved garden when the world suddenly began to spin, accompanied by a blinding headache and intense nausea, leading him to believe that he had perhaps suffered a severe case of sunstroke under the warm southern sky. As a trained professional nurse, Lana stepped forward to take full control of the situation, declaring that the absolute best course of action for Steve was complete. Uninterrupted bed rest in their upstairs master bedroom. Steve would later recall laying his head down on the pillow, only for 36 hours to pass in a complete blank blur before he finally opened his eyes again. Deeply worried by his sudden absence, Rosie called the house to speak with Lana, seeking an explanation for this alarming mystery illness. To Rosie, it seemed profoundly odd and deeply concerning for a person of any age, let alone a man as vital as Steve, to completely lose 36 hours of consciousness. Lana, however, remained entirely calm and reassuring over the phone, stating that Steve was going to be perfectly fine, that she was watching over him constantly, and ensuring that his every medical need was met. She suggested that his larger-than-life energy had simply caught up with him, leaving his body completely exhausted. Hearing these comforting words from a professional nurse gave Rosie a deep sense of reassurance, confident that Lana was uniquely qualified to care for her brother in every possible way. This optimism seemed entirely justified when, just 2 weeks later, Steve appeared to make a full recovery, returning to his old, affectionate self just in time to throw a spectacular celebration for the 4th of July. The holiday party was just as grand and joyful as every other event they had hosted, with Steve embracing his guests and dancing beautifully with Lana in the backyard, leaving no doubt in anyone's mind that they were completely in love and destined for a long, happy life together. Yet, a mere 17 days after that joyful celebration, the dream was shattered forever. On July 21st, 2000 in Muoy Tam, a frantic call was placed to the York County 911 Emergency Dispatch Center, summoning police units and medical personnel to the lakeside estate. Body camera footage recorded by the responding officer, Sergeant Day, captured the somber reality that awaited them inside the home. As the officers stepped through the front door, they immediately spotted Steve lying motionless at the very bottom of the grand central staircase. Tragically, it was already too late. His vital signs were gone, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. The responding officers began whispering and speaking in low, hushed tones, acutely aware that Lana Clayton was standing just around the corner, completely distraught, weeping, and crying out in grief. Sergeant Day gently approached the grieving widow to gather essential details about the timeline of events. Lana, trembling, explained to the officer that Steve had been suffering from a return of his severe dizziness for the past 2 days. She claimed that on Thursday morning he had attempted to stand up, became intensely dizzy, and collapsed, requiring her assistance to help him climb back upstairs to bed, from which he had not descended until his fatal fall. As the interview continued, Lana explained that she had been outside, quickly mowing the lawn, and upon walking back into the house, she discovered him lying at the foot of the stairs. She expressed immense remorse, crying that she had tried to slide a comfortable blanket underneath his body but lacked the physical strength to move him further, despite her medical training. She claimed she had panicked upon realizing she could do nothing more to save him, running out to the driveway when she heard a passing motorcycle to wave the rider down and beg them to call 911. Meanwhile, Steve's nephew, Nick French, was performing his duties as a police officer when his own mother called with the devastating news. The words hit him with a wave of absolute disbelief, though he knew the report was real. The reality of his uncle's passing simply would not sink in. He rushed to the scene as quickly as possible, his mind racing with agonizing questions of how and why this could happen to a man so full of life. When Rosie received a phone call hundreds of miles away, she was entirely overcome, unable to comprehend how her big brother, her lifelong hero, could possibly be gone. In the immediate aftermath, Nick and his family rallied around Lana, feeling a deep sense of sorrow for her grief, unable to imagine the immense trauma of finding her husband collapsed on the floor. Lana continually suggested that Steve's severe vertigo must have caused him to lose his balance and, suffer a horrible fall down the steep staircase. Sergeant Day carefully examined the surrounding area for any immediate indicators of foul play or A, physical struggle, noting that while it initially appeared to be a natural death, a thorough investigation was mandatory. The officer walked up the grand staircase, navigating the large, labyrinthine home to ensure no signs of an intruder or a struggle existed in the upper rooms. In the master bedroom, the bed sheets were found heavily rumpled, but there was nothing to indicate a violent altercation had occurred. Downstairs, the responding coroner examined Steve's body, noting an absence of significant bruises or contusions that would typically accompany a fall down a long flight of wooden stairs. Instead, the coroner observed a distinct blueness spreading across the top of Steve's chest and face, a physical sign that frequently indicates a sudden, massive heart attack. Sergeant Day shared this preliminary assessment with Lana, comforting her with the theory that Steve had likely managed to walk down the stairs before, collapsing naturally due to his heart, a conclusion that Lana accepted as the day God had chosen for him. While Lana digested the tragic news, Nick and his family volunteered to help clean and organize the home to ensure she would be comfortable spending the night there. However, as they stepped into the upstairs master bedroom, they were met with an immediate, deeply unsettling shock. The room was filled with a powerful, overwhelming smell of human waste, and upon stripping the sheets, they discovered massive, deep urine discoloration spots that had soaked completely through the center of the heavy mattress. The discovery raised troubling questions in Nick's mind. The sheer volume of fluid required to completely saturate a thick mattress suggested that Steve had been confined to the bed, unable to move to the bathroom, for several days prior to his death. Determined to remove the soiled item, the family struggled to lift the incredibly heavy, waterlogged mattress, ultimately carrying it downstairs and tossing it out of the house. Later that evening, Rosie spoke with Lana on the phone, questioning how Steve's condition could have deteriorated so rapidly without anyone being notified. Lana claimed that Steve had simply been sleeping heavily, resting as he attempted to recover, and noted that he had misplaced his essential cell phone a week prior, rendering him unable to call out. This detail struck a chilling chord with Rosie. Her brother was a meticulous man who was never, ever without his phone, an object that went everywhere with him, sparking a growing, terrifying suspicion that something deeply sinister was unfolding. The suspicion deepened when Rosie questioned Lana regarding Steve's legal will. Steve and his sister had discussed his estate plans many times, with Steve expressing an explicit desire to be laid to rest in a beautiful family cemetery plot in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. To Rosie's absolute amazement, Lana flatly claimed that there was no will in existence, revealing that she had already finalized arrangements to have Steve's body immediately cremated, with a memorial service scheduled at the lakeside home on August 4th, 2000 in Muoy Tam. When the family arrived for the memorial, they were heartbroken by the deep sorrow filling the air, yet their sadness quickly turned utter bewilderment upon entering the master bedroom closet. Lana had already completely cleared out every single one of Steve's personal belongings, donating his entire wardrobe to the Veterans Affairs organization. Rosie was nearly knocked off her feet to see rows of empty hangers where her brother's clothes had hung just days before. Furthermore, Steve's expensive collection of watches, his personal jewelry, and even his sacred wedding ring had completely vanished. The idea that a meticulous accountant and financially brilliant businessman like Steve would neglect to draft a formal will made absolutely no logical sense to his family, cementing their belief that a crime had been committed. Acting on their instincts, they contacted the medical examiner's office, adamantly requesting a comprehensive autopsy and a detailed toxicology screening, an appeal that was shared with Detective Motes of the York County Sheriff's Office. When the initial autopsy findings were processed, they revealed underlying signs of coronary artery disease, prompting an initial ruling of death by natural causes due to a heart attack. However, the detectives and the family knew that the definitive answers lay within the pending toxicology, Report, keeping everyone waiting on pins and needles for the absolute truth to be unveiled. 5 weeks after Steve's sudden passing, the toxicology results finally arrived, sending shockwaves through the entire department. While the blood work showed traces of standard sedatives, marijuana, temazepam, and Benadryl, it also revealed a massive, lethal concentration of a chemical known as tetrahydrozoline. This compound was the active ingredient found in common, over-the-counter eye drops like Visine or Murine, a substance that is strictly never meant to be ingested. In tiny doses, tetrahydrozoline causes severe illness, nausea, and dizziness. In large quantities, it acts as a powerful neurotoxin that completely shuts down the central nervous system, ultimately inducing a fatal cardiac event. Recalling the initial scene, investigators remembered seeing a bottle of Visine sitting prominently on a tall dresser in the master bedroom, far out of reach from the bed where Steve had been confined. The pieces of the puzzle instantly clicked into place. This was an undeniable case of intentional poisoning, and Detective Motes immediately brought Lana Clayton in for an intense interrogation. During the recorded interview, detectives questioned Lana regarding the various medications found within her husband's system, while she admitted he frequently took Benadryl for rest. She made absolutely no mention of the lethal tetrahydrozoline. The chemical was entirely colorless, odorless, and tasteless, making it the perfect, undetectable weapon for a poisoner. When the detectives confronted her directly with the high, lethal concentration of eye drops found in Steve's blood, pushing her to explain how such a substance entered his body, Lana dropped her first defensive shield. She claimed that Steve regularly, intentionally placed drops of Visine directly into his morning coffee every single day, falsely asserting that he believed it helped relieve his chronic ailments, despite knowing it caused severe diarrhea. Seeking to paint herself as a victim, Lana began to allege that Steve possessed a dark, volatile side, claiming she lived her life constantly walking on eggshells due to his extreme verbal abuse and cruel insults. As the interview progressed and a simultaneous search warrant was executed at the lakeside residence, Lana suddenly requested to speak privately with Detective Motes once more to unburden her conscience. In a stunning recorded confession, she admitted that her anger toward Steve had been simmering intensely following his initial bout of illness in June. She claimed that a co-worker had once casually mentioned that putting eye drops into a person's drink was a clever way to get even with someone because it would induce uncomfortable illness. Seeing the bottle of Visine sitting on the table, she admitted she was overcome by spite, taking the bottle and forcefully squeezing the entire contents directly into Steve's drinking water. Horrified, Detective Motes confirmed that she had utilized the entire bottle, to which she quietly replied that she believed she had. She concluded her statement with a haunting question, asking what would happen to her if she had inadvertently caused his death with the eye drops. The confession was completely damning, but investigators withheld immediate arrest for less than 24 hours to ensure all formal warrants were perfectly processed. Early the following morning, emergency services received a frantic call from one of Lana's neighbors, who had discovered a disturbing suicide note. Realizing that the police were returning to arrest her, Lana had turned on the home's gas supply and consumed a massive quantity of pills in an attempt to end her own life. Officers discovered her unconscious in the upstairs bed, rushing her to a local hospital where she was successfully treated, stabilized, and immediately placed under arrest on formal charges of murder and the malicious tampering of food products. When Nick received the confirmation of her confession and arrest from the detectives, the reality hit him like a baseball bat to the face. While Rosie could only scream in agony and betrayal upon hearing that the woman her brother loved had taken his life. On January 16, 2020, the legal proceedings reached a conclusion when Lana Clayton accepted a formal plea deal, entering a plea of guilty to the lesser charges of voluntary manslaughter and food tampering. Standing before the judge, She maintained the defense that she had only intended to cause him physical discomfort and diarrhea, as a lesson for his alleged abuse, drawing her medical knowledge of the substance's effects entirely from popular Hollywood movies. However, Steve's family, friends, and the prosecuting team completely rejected this narrative. Dozens of young men whom Steve had selflessly mentored came forward to testify to his gentle, profoundly kind soul, proving he was entirely incapable of abusing anyone. The true horror of the crime was laid bare by the scientific facts of the toxicology report, which proved that Steve had not died from a single dose on Thursday morning, as Lana claimed. Had he ingested that immense volume all at once, he would have perished within hours. Instead, the data proved that Lana had methodically, continuously poisoned her husband with small doses of eye drops over a torturous 3-day period. Lana had used her professional nursing knowledge not to heal, but to act as a nurse from hell, systematically stripping her husband of his strength until he was completely helpless. Steve, a renowned clean freak who took immense pride in his personal hygiene, had been left trapped in a urine-soaked bed, entirely too weak to cry out for help, with no landline phone available to contact the outside world. On Saturday morning, realizing the end was near, she squeezed a final, fatal dose into his water, watched him drink it, and then callously went outside to mow the lawn so she would not have to witness the final, agonizing moments of his passing. At the age of 53, Lana Clayton was sentenced to 25 years in a maximum security prison, a penalty that Steve's best friends felt was far too lenient for a monster who had spent days methodically destroying a beautiful life. The family was left with a chilling realization of how close she had come to executing the perfect crime had they not followed their intuition and demanded a full toxicology screening. The coroner's initial assessment of natural heart disease would have stood unchallenged forever. The true, glaring motive behind the tragedy was completely exposed as financial gain. Under the laws of South Carolina, the absence of legal will meant that an individual's entire estate would automatically transfer directly to the surviving spouse. Lana knew that by destroying Steve's will and taking his life, the beautiful ocean blue mansion, the vast investments, and the magnificent lakeside property would all belong exclusively to her. In the years that have followed, the Clayton family has carried the heavy burden of his absence, finding solace in the beautiful memories of the man who brought so much light into their lives. They miss his booming, over-the-top personality, his gregarious character that would completely take over any room he entered, and his ability to make everyone laugh. Though Steve Clayton was cruelly stolen from everyone who loved him, the enduring warmth of his spirit, his boundless generosity, and the echoing memory of his trademark greeting, "Hello, hello, hello," will live on in their hearts for eternity. The warmth of Miami always seemed to amplify the joy of momentous occasions, and March 10th, 2007 was no exception. The sun shone brightly over the gathering, casting a golden hue upon a family brought together by love, remembrance, and the promise of a new beginning. It was a wedding day of Rosemary Clayton and her beloved partner, William Leslie. For Rosie, the day was filled with a profound mixture of immense happiness and a tender, lingering sorrow. Just 11 months prior to this beautiful morning, the family had lost their anchor, their beloved father. The absence of a steady hand and warm smile weighed heavily on everyone, especially Rosie as she prepared to walk down the